my name is Mira Vasic and welcome to my interview with an expert. Today I'm going to be speaking about female leadership with Cara Antoine. Cara, very welcome to my open air studio.
Thank you so much, Mira. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. Cara, we are going to dive directly deep into the questions. So we met exactly 1 year ago in June 2020, and it was during the COVID pandemics. I was impressed by the fact that you are so passionate about closing the gender gap that you have dedicated entire year of your time by volunteering on this topic. Can you tell me how did that happen?
Absolutely, and you're so right that I have tremendous passion in this space. I was working at Microsoft for the last 3 years, and in a period of transition, and while I was doing a little bit of self-exploration on what do I really want to do next, one thing that I had started while I was still at Microsoft was my engagement with a movement called Global Women in Tech. And it became pretty apparent that some more help was needed in the Netherlands to really get us going. I was working full-time still at Microsoft, and I started to get myself really involved and engaged in the events and the initiatives and thinking we can do more, we can push the bar further, and we can excite and engage even more women here in the Netherlands in particular. And what I found myself evolving into was a decision to transition out of the role that I had at Microsoft, start to look for a new job. Of course, doing so not realizing that we were heading into a pandemic. But
who knew that that's going to happen, right?
that was going to happen.
And what is the better moment for you to have two jobs than...
Right. So timing is everything. And I am the luckiest person in the world that I had this opportunity already, something that I was working on while at Microsoft. And as you said really nicely actually at the beginning, I started to really involve myself on almost a full-time basis. Well, full-time was my focus on finding my next job, of course, which the pandemic didn't make any easier for me, considering. However, I felt so lucky to be engaged in a community of something that I really care deeply about, getting more women and girls excited about technology. We have a huge gap, and of course if we roll the clock forward a year later now, we see that that gap has quadrupled in its size, where we were looking initially at figures of saying we need 5 million more women and girls in this period between now and 2030 to engage in a career in technology. Today, the number we're looking at is 8 million. So we've really widened the gap. And in fact, the numbers that we now look at are on par with what we were talking about in the year 1979. And so there's a lot of work to do. But in the period that I had while I was looking for my job, I really embraced this space of what can we do and what's it going to take to excite more girls and more women to get enthusiastic about technology.
You mentioned your tribe at the moment.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Who is your tribe?
And my tribe, if I can even say so, I have the pleasure of working with 18 other amazing women who are not necessarily technologists or not necessarily grew up in this space of business. But one way or the other, what we are discovering, of course, is that if a company today has not gone digital yet, it will. And so we see that wave coming. And so what you find are the need to find the right balance between being a great woman in technology, being a great technologist, and having the right human skills and leadership qualities that help you to succeed in business. And now we're looking at how do we combine the two and find the right balance. I think many times in my career I have met individuals, both women and men, who are fantastic at their craft. They're amazing technologists, for instance, but they may be lacking a little bit on the side of human skills and how to really make those skills effective in the business landscape. that actually led me to doing my doctoral work back in 2015, where I was surrounded by dozens and dozens of brilliant engineers and technologists who I just felt didn't know how to make the human connection and were not able to transmit their ideas and collaborate in ways that were effective in order to get more people excited about their ideas and ultimately to commercialize those ideas and to make business out of them. And so that already got me thinking about, well, what does it take to stimulate the right behaviors? And what are the things that we're doing that kind of messes things up along the way? What's hindering our progress to collaborate well for innovation's sake, and to do that at scale? Because what we do recognize, of course, is that in any organization, you need to be able to communicate your ideas and get enough energy around what those ideas are and what the outcome of that could be. And you also need to get people along on that journey with you. And if you're not able to make that connection, while you may have started with a fantastic idea, you're not going to make a whole lot of progress if nobody's on the path with you.
Yeah, and that is what makes you a leader, basically, if you have people who follow you, right? And that's why I was asking about your tribe that you mentioned. So I follow you every day, of course, and the Women in Tech movement, especially the Netherlands chapter, and I admire you, how you, as the president of such an important and growing organization, are also bringing these 18 people together with you. But was that difficult for you?
It wasn't difficult for me. I think in any entity where you have a group of volunteers, you have fluctuations. People will come and they will go. But what I have found, and why in fact we call ourselves a tribe, is that there is this core group of people who are so dedicated and so passionate as I am, about this need to solve this problem of not having enough women and girls in technology, that through their dedication, they make it work, actually. And for me, that's not difficult at all, because they bring so much to the table in terms of this range of skills. I have a woman that I have met who is an expert in robotic process automation. There are others that are working on data analytics, that are data scientists. I have a biomedical engineer in the team who also happens to be brilliant in marketing and designs all of our assets for us. Her name is Rita, and she's just fabulous. And every individual in the team has a unique set of skills that they bring to the table, and they're there because they want to be there. And so that's not difficult for me. We started with a group of maybe 35 people in the beginning, and we thought there's a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement, but actually, when the rubber hits the road and you need to produce a campaign or come up with an event or dive into your network and find fantastic speakers to motivate others by listening to their talks, then you realize that there's work to do. You have to roll up your sleeves.
In the meanwhile, and I asked them about Cara, and what each of them told me is that you're amazing. They said, we have only extremely positive things to say about Cara. And I said, I'm really happy to hear that. But then my question to you, Cara, is how is that possible? I mean, what is your secret of how do you do that? How do you do that?
I don't think there are really any secrets, but for sure, one thing is I'm very willing to be vulnerable. And what's keeping me young in this whole conversation with a fantastic group of people who are really half my age is that they see me willing to try with them. And I think that's, my message here is the humility and the confidence at the same time to say, we're going to find a solution for this. We'll find a way to make this happen. And I'm going to help you find that solution. We're going to do that together. So I hope that some of their feedback was they feel that I've always been their wingman. I want to put them forward into the spotlight. I want them to shine. And for me, seeing their success makes me feel like I'm being successful too. And that's an approach that I really try to embrace and take with me in any role that I have, whether in the space of volunteering or in my corporate life as well. And so I think for me, it's that bit of vulnerability that really helps. It's really just me. It's very authentic.
Authenticity, yes.
Yeah.
And that is one of the main reasons why I invited you today to talk to you, because I think you are one of these authentic leaders that everyone are seeking nowadays for. And thank you for this amazing example, what you said. I think that the way you combine being vulnerable, but then on the other hand, showing the direction and saying, okay, I believe that this is towards where we should go. I think that is indeed your great values and your great way of leading. And saying that, my question then is it challenging for you to balance kind of feminine, traditionally considered feminine and traditionally considered masculine features at your work?
So I think you used a really important word, which is balance. And I can't say that I've always gotten that right. I think early in my career, probably I led with more masculine behaviors because that's what I was seeing, and I was modeling after the behaviors that were in front of me. I've almost always been the only woman in the room, the only woman in the conference, and so I'm modeling the behaviors that I see in front of me. And I was doing that while I was getting to know myself better. And now I think I know myself pretty well. I'm still learning. And life is a good lesson. And what I'm really learning about myself is the strength of some of the attributes on the feminine archetype that I do bring are things that I also can be very proud of and that I think make a real difference. And I'm talking about, for instance, I know that I am a kind person. And I'm okay to say that I'm kind, but don't mistake that for being weak. I'm kind because I'm compassionate, and I care a lot about how others are doing, and I care a lot about their own success. And I think that individuals would much rather work with a leader who cares than a leader with a fancy title. And so when we have more compassion in our work and we can really stand in someone else's shoes and say, what interests you makes me so enthusiastic. I'm really excited about something that you're interested in, and really focusing wildly on the other side and showing that what is happening for them is so important to you. I think makes a real difference in your approach. And that for me is also compassion, it's empathy. And I think some other words that I would use to describe the traits and the behaviors I really try to lead with is having integrity and honesty, that vulnerability and humility that I talked about earlier as well. Being a great listener. And that's something that I really take a lot of pride in, is knowing that I am always available to be a listening ear to someone else. And I think that when we can make connections and in fact make business a little bit more personal, it really makes a difference in how we understand each other, how we can relate to each other, and in establishing that trust that's needed to do amazing things and solve some of the world's most complex problems in business. It's very difficult to do those things if you can't have that approach and take those traits to really show an individual that you've created this safe space. You've created a place where they can learn, where they can grow, where they can fail, where I can fail, and that's okay. And so I think all of those traits are much more for me on the feminine side that definitely make a real difference in the relationships at work.
Yeah. And then it comes to my mind, because you mentioned the safe space, and then you mentioned your very far previous experience when you were the only woman quite often in the meetings, and I can totally relate to that because I have been in the same situation. How was that experience for you when you were much younger in your career? I mean, when you were at the beginning of your career, quite often the only woman. Was that safe environment for you as a person, both, and as a worker, employer?
Not always, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I think I made mistakes because I also wasn't being the real me, and not yet confident enough about who I was as a person. And I was also learning about the ways of business, of course, which was very, very male dominated at that time. One story that I remember, and I'm reminded because of this beautiful fuchsia color that you're wearing right now, is I had an experience one time where I was invited into a boardroom to give a presentation on a project that I had finalized. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go in and make a presence, and I'm going to really be sure that, you know, I get this message across. And I made a choice that I really, among this room of what I knew would be men wearing dark suits, and I needed to really stand out. And so your choice of color today reminded me of my choice. Also, what I did at the time, I wore head to toe a fuchsia jumpsuit, you know, with a jacket and pants, and I think even the shoes were matching. I'm not quite sure, but it was pretty alarming, actually, the whole set on me. And my hair was definitely a tad blonder than what it is even today. And so I came in as this sort of screaming siren of color, because I thought, I want them to see me. As it turned out, for my presentation, I wasn't standing up in the room. I was asked to take a seat at the table, so they also only saw the top half. And then I realized that something was happening in the dynamics in the room around the table, that it really didn't matter at all what I looked like. It mattered that I would get my voice into the room. And I hadn't gotten that figured out at that point until a few minutes into, painful minutes into the conversation, where I was there to present my own success and achievements, and no one was looking at me or listening to me. And I thought, what's going on? What are these dynamics in the room that I hear? And what was happening was one man to the left was sort of clearing his throat. Another was doing a little cough into his hand. And there were these different sounds going on in the room. And what I recognized was, it was sort of this grunting behavior. And it reminded me of sort of cave days of, you know, getting your voice into the room. And whoever made that sort of vocal sound was the next one to speak. Because it was sort of like asking permission in a way to speak by basically saying, I'm here, you know? And so I thought, all right, I'm going to do my very best clearing the throat, you know, entry into this conversation that's all about my project that I should be having. And I did so, and then suddenly the whole room turned and looked at me. And I thought that was the secret. It wasn't about being there to be seen, it was being heard. And I think what's become really important to me throughout my career is a feeling of belonging, of being in a room where your ideas are being heard. To me, is belonging in the room. And it has nothing to do with how you look, how you appear, although it's wonderful to wear these beautiful colors that I also love. And at the same time, I think learning those types of tricks throughout my career, some of the secret sauce, has really made a difference in terms of finding my time, finding my timing within a conversation to bring my message across, but to be sure that I have my voice in the room in order to feel like I belong in that conversation.
Excellent example. I really like it. This is a typical, what I like to call it, the unwritten rules at workplace. So there is a certain rule which everyone are silently following. They are also not aware of it in most of the cases. But then once you recognize it, indeed, it really changes and makes a big difference. So how would you then advise other people, whether they are men or women, to recognize this kind of small unwritten rules at workplace? What can they do in practice in order to discover these kind of things?
That's a great question, and I don't think has one answer. Because, you know, and I use a phrase frequently these days, which is different places, different paces. And every work environment is different because of the individuals in that organization who have formed a culture. And in any organization that you step into or that you are a part of, there was a beautiful book written about the smell of the place. And I think that says a lot about, getting to understand the tribal behaviors, understanding, what's going on in this environment that I am in, and being tuned into that, understanding what the small signals are. I've missed a lot of signals throughout my career that I thought, oh, was that a signal? Was that a clue?
I think each of us has.
That went over my head. Okay, could you have maybe put it in big letters or put a flashing siren over your head, because I missed that signal altogether. Didn't know, didn't have a clue. Yeah. And I think it's learning to really become more reflective, really being able to hold up also a mirror of look for the things that you're reacting to, because I think what you're reacting to in the environment is also really indicative of what's happening around you. You're having a response to that, whether it's positive or negative, or it's the ones that you might be a little bit more neutral to that you might be missing the clues to. But look and listen to yourself in terms of what's causing a reaction in you, because it says something about the people you're working with and the culture that you're in. And I think it's really important to get clued in to the culture. A great question that I think is really important in any interview that people go into is simply to ask the question, what's your culture like in this organization? Because one thing for sure is the interviewer on the other side of the table is definitely evaluating you based on their knowledge and understanding of their culture. Will this person fit into our culture?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for you to be very aware yourself of the question, tell me a little bit more about your culture, because I want to understand if it's a place that I will feel comfortable as well. So the person on the other side of the table, don't just be accepting, oh, there's a job, they want me, this is great, but also check for yourself. It's so important to feel like it's a place where you feel that it can work for you. And I'm very careful in saying, so I just said that the interviewer is looking to you for the proper fit, but be very careful about trying to fit in. I think there's a real difference in that. Don't try to conform specifically to everything else that everybody else is doing. There was a great book that was written by a person who used to be the cartoonist at Hallmark. And the book was called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And what you have to look at is that an organization is that giant hairball. And that is attracting everyone, every little piece of hair in the organization, to want to be a part of that hairball. And what I always advise to people, and I try to remember for myself, so I just started also myself a new job this year, is to orbit that hairball for as long as possible before you get sucked into it, because once you get in, it's really hard to get out again. And so orbit by being yourself and being amazing. Just orbit that hairball and try to look at the things that could need some changing or improving. Because as long as you're orbiting, you're staying fresh and you have a different perspective than everybody else who's already a part of that hairball, because they can't see through it anymore. They can't see what needs to change anymore. They may struggle with how do I make improvements here, because actually everyone else is a part of this hairball with me. So orbit the giant hairball for as long as you possibly can before you feel like you're really being pulled into it, because that's when you have the greatest ability, I believe, to bring change and make improvements to the things that could stand improvement. And so I think that's maybe a nice example or illustration of what people can do in these cultural opportunities that they find themselves in.
Yeah. I really like your example. It's really like illustrative, so you can really understand that. And then the question, how is this hairball for you at the moment? We know that you are, of course, still the president of Women in Tech Netherlands chapter, but you also started as managing director of digital transformation in January. also the only woman at that that position, right? So how is it this orbiting around this ball for you at the moment?
Yeah, I'm orbiting. I'm still orbiting, I have to say, and that is bringing some change, needed change, also in our organization. A fantastic company that is very focused on wanting to evolve itself. 33 years in business, and every time they see a new opportunity and are working on trying to stay ahead of what's happening in the market. And so the opportunity for me to step in with a fresh perspective, with ideas that I bring with me from other places, I think has proven to be very valuable to the organization, and a place where I certainly feel like I really belong. So this is giving me a great feeling. I think in terms of the other elements, in terms of the balance of everything else that I have done. So as you started this conversation, you rightly highlighted that I really immersed myself in some full-time voluntary activity, and it was women in tech, and I'm also in some other spaces as well. So the Corneal Patients Association, on the supervisory board of Vortel, the Quality Council at the BIT Academy, trying to get more girls into coding, and also worked with a dear friend of mine in co-founding the Shell Alumni Network. And so I was really involved in a lot of things last year, and suddenly I found myself in a full-time job and needing to figure out how do I continue that flow of the activities that I'm working in while I'm working full-time. And I haven't gotten that balance completely right yet because I'm working full-time, and when my day ends, my voluntary work begins. And so that's something that I'm really trying to figure out how I find a better balance for myself in terms of how I'm spending my time. The one thing is that I love what I'm doing. And
I can see that.
And so that makes it very difficult for me to slow down. I said to a good friend of mine yesterday, if only there were more hours in the day, I would get to do so much more. And she said, well, that's the thing, is maybe it's a good thing there aren't more hours in the day because you don't stop, you know. So it's important somehow to try to find the right balance.
Yeah.
Not an easy thing to do.
I wish you best luck and success on this path. I will ask you the very last question, Cara. Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
Volunteering and then coming back?
Without even knowing the rest of the question, I would do it all over again. Yes, I absolutely. The being a part of the Global Women in Tech movement has been the greatest privilege of my lifetime. And I mean that with all sincerity, because I have seen the impact that we could have as a tribe, and the honor and the pleasure, really, to get to lead such a fantastic group of individuals, and not really feel like I'm the one in charge, because it's all about the tribe and what we can do together to achieve great things, and to really empower and enable others around us to achieve what they want to achieve.
Thank you so much, Cara. Thank you for being my guest. Thank you for everything that you are doing for all the people on this world, and I wish you a lot of success.
Thank you so much.
I would like to thank to all of you for joining us. Follow Dr. Cara Antoine on LinkedIn. Join Women in Tech and follow their initiatives, and I see you again.